Hello, everybody, and welcome to another bite-sized feast brought to you by the Escape. Today, we'll be talking about cookies. Interesting enough, also bite-sized snacks. So to kick this off, just to take you through briefly what we'll be discussing, we'll go through a bit of a history as to where cookies came from, how they've been used, what that's led to happening, rules that are put in place because of that, where we are today, and also where we might be going in the future when it comes to cookies and how things work out. So without further ado, let's jump into the cookies. So way back in the day, and I'm talking mid 90s here, 94, 95, 96, the internet was around. I am young enough to remember these days, but back then the internet was very different to what it is right now. There was very little interaction in terms of responses that computers give to requests that we send to websites. Like I said here, the internet was pretty much a magazine stand where a website consisted of a series of static pages that you'd have to say, I would like to look at this page, please. There wasn't any real way for me to say, I would like to look at this page, but also remember the pages that I looked at the back. So it was very, very static. For some fun, here's some snapshots of what the internet looked like back in there, just to sort of jog some of our memories. And for those who weren't around for that, show you how far we've come. So Apple used to look like this. Hard to believe that they are considered a design icon in this day and age. This was one of the first examples of a political campaign that ran on a website. I think they were the first digital campaign run for a political party back in the day. And then lastly, you can forget how big Windows 95 was and what that did for us Windows users. This was the website that launched it all. Interesting enough here, there's a banner ad on this page. So advertising's been around since way back when as well. So now that we know what the internet used to look like, I think it's important to get a sense of where cookies came from. Cookies today, whether you love them or hate them, this is the man responsible for it. Lou Montulli. So way back in the day, he used to work for Netscape. And he wanted to see, well, understanding that there was potential in monetizing the internet and doing transactional things on there, he wanted to find a way to, leverage this. And he had a couple of issues that he ran into while going through these sort of his planning and then his execution. One of them was that there was no way to validate users back in the day. You couldn't have a website remember who you were. This is obviously very important for things like transactions and making sure that I'm the right person who's put my credit card details in and things like that. The next thing was there's no way for websites to know what you did a step in the past. So there was no persistence of information carried through between steps on the internet or between web pages. So user validation was very important. Like I said, we need to be able to attribute a decision that someone's made to a user. Like if I decided to download the PDF, or if I decided to purchase the software, I needed to be able to validate that it was me doing that. It's also very important if you're looking at working with secure information like credit card details or banking details, as well as any kind of profile management. So if I were to, let's say, log into my council's website to, I don't know, download my latest gas statement, there would be no way for me to do that because there was no validation of me as a person. That then led to another problem, which was the persistence of information. So let's say we could solve the verification thing. So I could log in and say, hi, this is me. I've done this. I am now looking for this document. If I were to click onto the next page or do something else, the website won't remember that it's me. So I'd effectively have to log in on every single page that I go to. but I still would not be able to carry over any information or anything that I'd done on the previous step. But this revolution has allowed for things like, being able to add stuff to the cart versus just purchasing. I'll touch on that a bit later. Things like having preferences. So if you go to Reddit and you've got a selection of subreddits that you follow, or you've got a tailored news feed on your favorite news site, these kind of preferences are only remembered through persistence of information. And then obviously, again, having profiles and profile information, you'd need to be able to carry information across to do that. But this was difficult to do. But it turns out that the solution was cookies. Now, what are cookies? In the most basic way of explaining it, cookies are small files that websites put on your computer that contain information about you. So, and then when you go to the website again later, your browser will then share these cookies with the website, and the website will go, okay, yes, I remember you, you've done this, you've done these things. This allows us to, stay signed in, provide me relevant content if I'm browsing for specific things based on where I am or who I am. So very, very helpful. To really get a sense of how cookies have made our online life a lot easier, I think we only have to look at a typical e-commerce site, not even a whole site, just a page, to get a sense of how much under the cover stuff happens. A lot of the things you'll see now are very small, and you might even think inconsequential or tiny, but they do ease or lubricate the transactions or the process, making it a lot smoother and a lot easier. So things like being able to see what products have been bought together could not have been done without cookies. The fact that Amazon remembers who I am when I've logged in, again, cookies. As I mentioned earlier, being able to add something to a cart and not just purchase. So I've added something to a cart, I've gone and browsed other products, and then I've come back later, maybe even a couple of days later, but it remembers that I've added to a cart and I can check it from there. So here, not just added to the cart, but also remembering that I've got things in my cart. My location information is quite important for me. So being able to work out shipping based on where I live, and being able to create wish lists would not be able to be done without cookies. And by that, information that Amazon can read and remember about me that's stored on my computer. So it was good, all good back in the day. We had easy shopping experience, a lot of cool functionality came out to the end user. But it was not just the users that it was good for. It was also good for marketers and brand owners, website owners. I think simply put, if there were no cookies, there would be no Google Analytics. So we would not be able to analyze the way people behave on our websites. Cookies are also very important to advertisers and marketers in the way we can leverage information to get more effective at what we do. So we can target people based on various criteria, age, where you live, what your hobbies are, those kind of things. Remarketing is a very big byproduct would not be able to work without cookies. Being able to frequency cap, to not serve one person a million ads, rather show them the 2 or 3 required to get them to convert. All of this does bring down the cost per acquisition. So it gives us a lot of room to get efficient in our marketing, meaning we can get much more return for what we spend. Obviously, when there's money involved, there's going to be some people who try and game the system. So everybody wanted to get in on the cookie game. Information is key or king. The more you know, the better. And it was really easy for people to just get cookies out in the open. Back in the day, there was no regulation around cookies on how they ended up on your computer. Every website was going, here's a cookie, there's a cookie. You never had to even accept them. They were just put there. And there was no real transparency around, what you were actually giving away, even when you did notice that there were cookies being put in place. This obviously led to a lot of people getting a whole bunch of data on you, and we got into a shady world of data selling, where websites would sell your data to other people. And it got quite prolific, where data brokers, as I like to call them, would incentivize websites to put their cookie on another website. So let's say I'm a data broker and I go to CNN and say, hey, you get a lot of traffic. Can I pay you, 20 cents per click or per visitor to your site? And then here is a cookie that you put on their computers from your site. And then I can take that information as a data broker and then sell that on the dark network. I mean, it is quite insane. I recently heard a story about how the CIA couldn't get a warrant to search someone's internet history. So they went to a data broker and bought it in an auction, and managed to, track down a person's movements or search history that way. It was quite scary. But like I said, it's quite scary, but cookies aren't inherently ugly. They can, it's how they use that can become quite problematic. But, without any bad apples in this example, over a long enough period of time, the amount of information that can be stored in a cookie about you can grow so much that it can almost paint a full picture of a person. And I think there should be a concern with that kind of information just being available to people. It could potentially be abused, and it definitely feels invasive. So the problem with this, though, is that everybody was doing it. So why can't we? A couple of years ago, I did an exercise to sort of get a sense of how many cookies you would generate in a day. So what I did was, over the course of a week, I'd note everything that I did online to sort of put together what an average day's worth of internet usage could have been. I then cleared all my cookies. I put together a repeatable testing schedule where I'd visit, my email. I would click on 3 ads or 3 links. I would visit a news website. I would go to a social platform and click on 3 links, and repeated this, over the course of a week. And it was fairly, standard browsing behavior, I'd imagine. And every day I would clear my cookies, start again to sort of average out these numbers. And it turned out that you can generate about 800 cookies a day. It's quite terrifying. So, like I said, all these cookies were there to be sold on. A lot of people wanted to sell them. And this has been a cause for a lot of issue since it came to light, and a lot of people are a lot more vocal or concerned about their privacy online and what people have. And like I said, it can be seen as quite manipulative, predatory, and exploitative if you use that kind of information to sell products to someone. I think it's especially egregious in sort of kids advertising, as well as casino advertising, and those kind of places do use this data quite a lot. So, like I said, it's not the cookies that are bad, but people do bad things with them. There have been examples, not very many, or not that I've heard of recently, but there have been recorded examples of hackers who'd managed to get onto someone's computer via a dodgy MP3 they downloaded off LimeWire. For those of you who remember that back in the day. Or any other kind of way, they got into your computer, they've managed to download those cookies onto their own computer. And what they do is they'd visit bank sites, email sites, and then they would show your cookies to these sites, and these sites would think that it was actually you trying to log in, and they'd get access to your accounts and things like that. So it's can be abused quite a bit. But luckily, this isn't as widespread as I'd imagine it could have been. But it has happened. But all of these concerns and things have led us to the GDPR rollout. So the reason this came to be was, well, people were getting concerned about certain news coming out about data and what we're sharing online. The law itself that governed data privacy or digital privacy was 11 years old at this stage. I think there was a lot to be said and done around what happened with Facebook during the 2016 elections with Donald Trump, where he effectively used Facebook to create sort of social echo chambers and just disseminate the same kind of messaging to a certain group of people who were susceptible to it. And none of that could have happened without access to that kind of data from them. Like I mentioned, as well, targeted advertising to children has been a concern. And then lastly, there had been a number of data breaches where, people had said we've been hacked. And I think Sony was one of the first real big ones that made it public when their servers got hacked, probably about 2012, 2013-ish. And it caused a lot of concern, had a lot of information, credit card details, names, address, email addresses, quite scary. So this all led to a big review where we had to come together and say, all right, well, really sort these out. I think what really kicked it off, though, was a user actually sued Google in 2011 successfully because Google was providing ads in the in the remarketing engine based upon contents of their emails. So I went to court. Google lost this case, and this sort of kicked the wheels in motion. Obviously, the wheels turned slowly, but this was one of the big things that said, okay, we need to now, with all of the stuff I mentioned in the previous slide, now we need to look at how do we get around data privacy and get a proper updated rules in place. So GDPR was born. Again, this is a little bit oversimplified, but GDPR exists on 7 main principles. So one of them being lawfulness, fairness and transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, integrity and confidentiality, and accountability. Whew, that's quite a bit. Now, what does this actually mean? Well, lawfulness and fairness of processing, we must get consent to be able to get people's data. We also need to be very clear as to what it is that we're collecting and why it is that we're collecting it. One of the other pillars is the data minimization, which means we should only collect what we need, not anything more. So if I'm interested in the person's location, that's the only thing I can get. I shouldn't ask or try and collect any of the information about their browsing activity or things like that, purely that one sector of data. We also have to make sure that all this data is accurate and up to date. That's just sort of a best practice thing. Then data can also only be stored for as long as it is needed. So you'll notice a lot of cookies have got like a policy date that says it runs for so long. Those are stipulated that we can only keep it for as long as you want. And then lastly, we need to be very, make sure that the data security is at the core of it all. So by that, I mean that you are responsible as the person holding the data for anything that happens to that data. So if I got a website and I get hacked and my user's information gets leaked, that's on me as the website owner, not on the hackers or on anyone else. So accountability and security go hand in hand. GDPR has evolved a little bit over time as well. Some of the newer things which have come into play are things like the right to be forgotten, where you can actually say, all right, I want to shut down my Instagram account and delete it. Don't just, keep the data yourself and make it not visible to people. You have the right for them to delete all that data. You also have the right to access any of the data that's collected by you. Sometimes hard to know who to ask, but you can, in some senses, find out what people know about you. I think it's quite interesting if you go to Google and you go to your own profile settings. I can't remember off the top of my head how to get there now, but you can actually get a clear picture as to what Google thinks about you and knows about you. And it'll tell you a lot of things. It's quite frightening how much Google knows about me. And obviously that information is then used by Google to serve me ads, make my browsing experience easier, those kind of things. Another thing that's happened after that is, in light of some data breaches, was that you have to now notify people of a data breach. I think back in the day, people were quite hesitant to tell the public that there was a data breach, and people find out later that there was a breach, and that kind of started part of this debate. But now you have to notify within a reasonable time. I think some people in the past have waited like over a year to tell audiences that they've been hacked, but you have to do it quite timelessly at the moment. Again, privacy by design, like I mentioned earlier, but privacy should be the first thing you're concerned about when it comes to data, and you're developing any kind of websites or any kind of digital platform. Privacy has to be one of the first things you look at. And another interesting thing is that even if you're a non-EU participant, you can be held accountable for any kind of breaches. So say I'm an American brand and I sell products and I ship to the UK, I am now liable for any kind of data breaches or any kind of negative spin-offs of that from a data perspective to a user from the UK. This is why a lot of people have adopted the GDPR's approach. America have taken pieces of it. A lot of other countries have taken pieces of the GDPR rules because they are quite robust, and rather go for the most hardcore rules, then you'll never be in violation in any other market. So we then had a nice, fun Brexit, which meant that we weren't part of the EU anymore, but we still had some accountability to people. And I think we did take the GDPR and change it a bit to make it our own. But before we get to that, I think it's important that we just talk about sort of two key elements which are going to be coming, or two key concepts which will be getting more important for the rest of this presentation. And that is sort of the difference between third-party data and first-party data. Third-party data is data that is used by me but not collected or stored by me. So you might use Google Analytics. Google, generates the data, they store it, but they provide me access to it and I can use it. That's third-party data. First-party data is data which I generate and access and store by myself. So if you're a company, you've got transaction records of sales, those would be first-party data. They're not shared with anyone else. They're not hosted or stored off-site. You own those servers, you own those records. So now that we have that in mind, the UK data policy, digital data policy, is, like I said, very similar to the GDPR. And to simplify it even further, I think these are the key takeaways to sort of bear in mind when we're considering where we are at the moment. Consent, always get permission to get people's data. Be transparent about what you're using, why you're using it. Take only what you need to take. Keep it safe. Make sure your servers are safe. Backups are done. Security certificates up to date. And then also that you are responsible. You are accountable, sorry. So anything that goes wrong here, it's on your shoulders potentially. So everything was good for a while. And then we got a lot more data breaches happening. I think about data breaches of this scale, and these numbers here are millions of people affected, or people affected. When big public breaches, data breaches happen, the media laps it up, and people talk about it. And this does drive awareness and drives dialogue, amongst the general population. And in recent times, this has started happening again. And we're seeing people now actually wanting more control over what's going on in their life. They don't like that people are collecting data about them. We've seen browsers also seeing that third-party data is on its way out. In some cases, is illegal. We've seen browsers opting out already. So iOS by itself as an operating system on your iPhones completely opted out of cookies or third-party cookies. Netscape's done it. We're seeing Google doing it at some point. Apple have also made tracking very, very difficult. So if you're a person running ads on Facebook, you'll know how hard it is in the last couple of years to try and run ads or track them correctly on Facebook, especially Facebook on iOS devices. Then obviously the last thing is what's going to happen in this whole new metaverse that Facebook Meta is talking about. I think in a world where everything is digital, there are some concerns around safety and what it means to be safe online. Bottom line of this is that third-party data is on its way out. Third-party data, unfortunately, means pretty much all cookies. So because of the many risks that we've seen, data breaches, the amount of data stored in these things, in cookies, the the accountability that governments hold on people, cookies just need to go out. So any kind of third-party data, third-party cookies are being phased out. Google is committed to the end of 2023 to completely done with it. And I think they're the last people to still really use them. Most of the operating or revenue is based on advertising, and advertising is quite dependent on cookies at the time. So I know Google would be one of the last to do it. But this means that we have to move to first-party data. Recently, Google Analytics was declared illegal in Austria. A court in Austria had found that the way that analytics was tracking users' data was in breach of GDPR laws. So it's held up. Google is going to contest it. But then just last week, there was another story that came out how in Belgium, the way that we've been doing cookie pop-ups, where pop up on the bottom of your website that says we've got a cookie policy, please accept, that has been deemed illegal too. That's going to be queried, and that's going to be appealed quite heavily, I'd imagine, because that's a direct response of having to do cookie notifications and GDPR things. But it's a very, very rocky time out there, is what I'm saying. In all of this, marketing is going to suffer the most. I mean, it's great for me as a user of the internet to know that my data is a bit more secure, but myself as an advertiser, it's a little bit sad because we do rely heavily on third-party data. We don't do anything mad with it or anything illegal with it, but I mean the likes of Google Analytics, Google Ads, Facebook Ads, Instagram, that's all third-party data. It'll also mean that tracking will likely disappear, at least the way we know it right now. The way in which we track people's behaviors across sites, that sort of persistence of data between pages, that is shifting quite a bit. I know that the new Google Analytics doesn't work on sessions anymore, it works on events. So and I'll maybe touch on that a bit later, but it does mean that we will lose a lot of granularity and visibility as to how people behave on websites that we run. Obviously, this means ads will lose efficiency. So if we can't target people by demographics or likes, interests, hobbies, those kind of things anymore, we're going to start reverting back to a more television billboard model, which is spray and pray, put ads up. Hopefully, some of it resonates with people. Obviously, this is not great from an efficiency perspective, and also, that's a saturated market as it is. So to give an example as to how a campaign typically looks, and I'm just using a Google environment here, we currently look at running Google ads, which are based, on audience data, which is actually pulled from sort of analytics codes and Google's sort of profiles on people. Because that sits in a separate database, Google Ads using Google Ad Analytics data is considered a third-party pool, so we can't be doing that anymore. Anything like we do, like our conversions to track success of things on websites, we often use analytics conversions tracking. That's third-party data. We won't be able to get that anymore. Our smart bidding that we use, again, not going to be able to use those anymore. And the ability to report across multiple channels is also going to be compromised, as well as the strategy we can build off that. We won't be able to fully map out how people are behaving sort of holistically in that digital space. So yeah, big concerns for marketers. But this is where we are. The future's upon us. So we just have to kind of go with it. So yeah, what's happening now? Well, like I said, Google Analytics is no more, sort of. The way we know it now, Universal Analytics is on its way out with the recent, court ruling that analytics is illegal. I suspect that we're going to see an accelerated phasing out of Google Analytics as we know it. There is a new Google Analytics 4 that's being rolled out. I'll touch base on that in a little bit. It's got some quirks. Where we're going to have to go from here as well, outside of just that, is we'd have to look at our own first-party tracking, so generating our own data on users. So think about having our own analytics platform that we own the servers that it's sitting, that the data is sitting on, and all of those things. Reporting is going to change. The way that we can be quite accurate and report to our superiors, or making sure that we're doing things correctly, is going to change. How that looks exactly is up in the air. There are many ways it's going to cut, as I say, and I think we will find ways to look at it, but we do know that the way we're doing it now is not going to be available in a short time period. And then obviously remarketing is going to be compromised. This is the one area where I don't see, or I haven't seen any new solutions proposed by the big players, Google's, the Facebooks. So it is a bit compromised. I'm sure that they are scrambling to get this right, and I'm sure there will be some version of it, but it's going to be different to what it is right now. It won't be based on, what a person's seen on your website. If they've come through, they looked at a couple of shoes, they go later onto another website and they see those shoes pop up on the side. That's likely not going to be around much longer. Cool. Targeting is a bit difficult. The reporting is also going to get less granular. We won't be able to use other tools to do reporting. So Data Studio to pull in data from Facebook, Instagram, website, those kind of platforms are likely going to become, well, not what they are anymore. They might disappear completely, or you'd have to start looking at investing in your own reporting platforms. The problem with the reporting tools and platforms that you own yourselves, it gets expensive. Generating your own data gets expensive. Storing it is expensive. All of these kind of things will require some level of expertise in configuring platforms, configuring servers, make sure the right data is being pulled. Ultimately, you'll have to hire a new person in your business just to handle the data. So BI specialist, it's going to become a person in every company that has any kind of digital presence, which obviously raises the cost to a business to sort of get that level of insights. So yeah, as we mentioned, you can have to start looking at getting our first party tracking sorted ourselves. So they would have to be custom, they have to be owned and operated by you. They have to follow the UK and GDPR laws. The problem is they are, like I said, difficult to configure. They require a strong dev team. You'd have to be able to have some insights in putting specific code on specific sections of a website to track specific actions. Obviously, now that you're looking after the data yourself, there's a higher risk to you from a legal perspective if anything goes wrong with that data. So if you get hacked, or a disgruntled employee takes your data and sells it to someone, you're ultimately liable for it. And then if you want to buy something off the shelf, again, that's expensive. So the cost involved in this new feature is not great, but I suspect with enough demand, economics will bring that cost down through a lot of people coming into that market, but it'll be more expensive than free, which it is right now. So looking at what Google is going ahead with. So like I said, they're getting rid of the Universal Analytics, going into what's called Google Analytics 4. It is what it is. We have to use it. There's nothing else. It's still very, very much what I'd like to call sort of half-baked. I think it is very much rushed out in response to what's been happening around the world. They clearly have put a lot of thought into it. They are trying to do very smart things there, but as it stands right now, it is quite cumbersome. You got to set up a lot of stuff manually. The way you navigate is very different. The way things are displayed is very different. You don't get the same kind of views anymore. So you don't get, I can't necessarily do a which referral sources drove the most conversions, and it's a lot different to those views that you're used to. And like I said, it needs a lot of configuration. I mean, to get any kind of good insight from it, you need to spend some time with it, tweak the settings, make sure you're manually putting in conversion points or actions to track. And it's going to be more anonymized and weighted than Universal Analytics currently is, which is quite weighted. Obviously, it's not 100% the right number. It's a little bit skewed to provide anonymous users. This is going to be in the future a lot more anonymized. So it won't be a one-to-one replication of what's actually happened on your site. It would be a version of that, which is a little bit hazy around the edges to keep people safe. Oh, I jumped too far. So again, as I mentioned, a lot of these things, not as clear, not as granular as we're used to. Some of the big changes we've seen is that it's event-driven, not session-driven. And what I mean by that is, in the past, if you come to the website, you'll start a session on the website and your entire journey for that visit is remembered, and what you did in there is remembered. Which is great because we can sort of see people's pods, we can remember what they've done, see where they've clicked, create some meaningful insights from those journeys. But it's moving to an events-driven engine, which looks at the number of times things happen. So instead of saying a person went from the home page to the Red Sox page to the checkout page, it's going to go, the home page was seen, the Red Sox page was seen, and a checkout happened. Now, in the old analytics, we would be able to see that that was a single user doing it. Now we won't be able to know that that was the same person hitting all three of those touch points. We're just going to see all these different touch points, and Google will try and infer how those journeys happened. And like I said, it is what it is. We have to make do. I don't think it's going to be that bad in the future. I do know Google are working very hard to get some meaningful data out there. I think Google Analytics, as we know it now, also took many years to become as robust as it is now. So it's not doom and gloom. It's just in the immediate future a little bit worrisome. But yeah, reporting is going to be a problem because we can't just report out of analytics anymore the way we used to be able to. But there are some good things you can do with sort of your own custom reporting software. Now, in the past, I've used tools like Tableau, and a couple of things which run on your own computer. So you supply it with your own data and you can visualize stuff. There are some silver lining around there. I think what is good about those tools is you can bring in lots of data sources to it. So you're not going to be limited to, this is what's happened on my website. I can take I can take offline sales data. I can take, all kind of data points and put them into one database and report holistically that way. It also allows for a lot more interesting activity where you can build out specific views or specific graphs that you can't do in other places or in Excel by itself. Cool. So now the next steps for us as marketers and businesses, what do we need to know and what do we need to do? So right now, you can go and set up Google Analytics 4. In fact, I suggest you do it. Not to switch to it immediately, but just so that there is already been some data in there by the time that the full switch happens, that you've got some historic data in your Google Analytics 4 account. It's a very simple setup. Go to Google Analytics. You will likely be prompted to set up a Google Analytics 4 account, and it'll take you through the steps. Then I'd suggest you look at some training on Google Analytics 4. There's a lot of tutorials online. I highly recommend just going to YouTube, searching GA4 tutorial or GA4 training. A lot of it's there, it's all free. Then also look at going through some of the Google qualifications just to upskill yourself in that sense. And then either you or invest in a data BI specialist, or this BI specialist can go and configure the analytics to show what you need to be seeing. Like I just alluded to it now, you're going to likely have to invest in a person or a team that handles data specifically. It's not just going to be, business intelligence. It's also likely going to have to cover, security of the data. Is it GDPR compliant? Is it UK law compliant? It is going to become a business function. You'd have to update your internal policies. So who's allowed to look at the data? How are you storing it? Are you notifying your customers on your website? The next thing, like I said, you're defining data recipients is looking at if you're an agency and you're sharing stuff with clients, what are you allowed to show them? You've got to define what is legal, what is not. If you're a business and you want to, share information at an event, maybe you did some good things, you could only show certain information now because some of it would have been generated by third parties. So it's quite a little bit of a loophole to go through, but there are specialists that can help you look at those things. Like I said, look around at other alternatives. There are a couple of alternatives out there to Google Analytics, to tracking software, to reporting software at the moment. I'm pretty sure there's going to be loads more popping up in the future. Like I said, at the moment, it can be quite pricey, so just keep a lookout. There will be some stuff coming through. I'm pretty sure of it. There's also more than one source of truth. So while we may be losing some reporting insights from Google Analytics and from Facebook and Instagram insights, there are other places you can look to get information. It's dependent on each business, so no two businesses will have the same kind of views, but there are other ways to arrive at similar information. I would say, though, until we lose all this data, is to download this data yourself, to try and understand it, try and understand your current customers, who are buying from you the most now, or who are engaging with you the most. Try and understand who they are, what they like, who their friends are, so that when we do lose some of this clarity or some of this visibility, you've got some information as to how to market to them, because you do know them a bit better now. Then, it's about getting into this data world, upskill developers on first-party data collection, what it means, what they need to be doing, what does it mean for your servers, what does it mean for your apps. And then lastly, if you do have an agency looking after your digital presence or your reporting or things like that, ask them what their plan is going forward. How are they going to start reporting in a world where analytics isn't there, or have they even thought about it? And how are they looking to engage with you from your data security perspective? And other than that, you can always talk to us. We're more than happy to have these discussions with you. And then lastly, quickly, this happened right before I started recording this today. Google have now just quickly released some of their future in advertising, the new Google ads. So they're all working on what's called the privacy sandbox, where it will be private, it will be secure, and as advertisers we can still target, or in an ideal world we can still target people in there like we would. Like I said, I didn't quite believe that is going to be possible. Turns out it's not quite just yet. They've just released something called topics, which is, and their words are, it allows you to market to people based on certain personality criteria or interests, but ultimately it is the same as what our display marketing is right now, which is probably the least effective digital marketing source. There's about 300 topics that people can fall into. So you could be a nature lover, or a music aficionado, or a movie lover, and we can target based around those. So still not nearly as granular as where you live, age, more detailed in market. What are you looking for at the moment? This is just a personality trait. So it's not quite there yet, but it does show that Google is thinking about this. Phew. Thank you very much for your time today. We're looking forward to hearing from you guys very soon.